Joining me now from New York is an old friend, U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham, Republican of South Carolina. He's a candidate for his party's presidential nomination, member of Senate Appropriations, Armed Services, Budget, and Judiciary Committees. Also served in the United States Air Force and U.S. Air Force Reserves. Good to see you again, Lindsey.
Well, thank you, Larry. That was a kind introduction. Thank you.
All right. The events of recent weeks, the terrorist bombings in Paris, has this changed the landscape of the presidential race?
Yeah, there was the election before Paris. There's the election after Paris. There was ISIL before Paris. There's ISIL after Paris. I think for the average American, this is definitely a wake-up call. And the whole concept of, do you want an outsider, insider, experience, no experience, I hope it changes in this regard, that when it comes to being commander-in-chief, experience will matter after Paris.
In foreign policy, you would have more experience than most of them put together, right?
Well, I've been to Iraq and Afghanistan 35 times. In the last decade, I've really been busting my butt to try to understand this war. And here's the good news. Most people in the region, Larry, are not buying what ISIL's selling. Very few mothers and fathers want to turn their daughters over to ISIL. The region is ready to go after ISIL. They just need our help. Let them lead this war, but we have to be part of the effort.
Do you expect to be part of future debates now on the major part?
I hope so. The worst thing you can do is win a debate because they kick you out of the next one. You know, this whole polling stuff is absurd. I've never run for president before. You know, I don't come from a political family. I haven't had a television show. So I don't expect to poll well early on, but I do expect to be heard. I don't think I'm an undercard candidate regarding this race. And I hope I do get in the next debate. And it's a mistake, in my view, to shut people down based on polling. Let us all be heard and let the public decide who they want to stay in this race.
Senator, how do we go to war with an idea? We don't know. ISIL's everywhere. How do you fight an idea?
Well, what did we do with the Nazis? They wanted a master race, and the rest of us said no. This idea will die over time. It's a very horrible idea. In the world of ISIL, women have no say. There's only one way to worship God, their way or death. So most people in the faith don't accept what they're preaching. The world at large is at risk. So the Nazis wanted a master race. They want a master religion. Here's what you do. You go to the people within the faith. The overwhelming majority of Muslims reject this ideology. You go in on the ground with a regional army. There are large armies in Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Turkey. You use their army with integrated Western forces so that we can win. But after you destroy the caliphate, you have to stay involved. Here's how you win the war. A young girl having an education with a voice about the future of her children throughout the Mideast destroys radical Islam. I'm in it for the long haul. They're offering a glorious death. What we need to do is offer a hopeful life. And that means we have to stick with it and build up the lives of others.
Do you think the American public is prepared to put more of its sons and daughters on the ground?
Yeah, because we have an army and a military for a reason, to protect our homeland. I think the American public understands that they're coming here next if we don't stop them over there. There's two places you can fight this war, on the streets of Raqqa or on American streets or European capitals. I choose to fight them in their backyard, not ours. And I really do believe, having been in the region for a very long time, that the conditions are right for the demise of ISIL with American leadership.
How do you see this leading to another 9/11?
Well, their capability to bring down airliners, to bomb places in Lebanon, to have a multiple attack in a major city convinces me that they're not being contained. Are they probably here already? Yeah. Do they want to come here? Yeah. You know, refugees. I think we should have a timeout in terms of Syrian refugees. But the problem is ISIL itself. So without intervening, without disrupting their networks, without going in on the ground and destroying the caliphate, it's just a matter of time till they hit us here. If they could attack Paris, they can attack America, and they would prefer to attack America.
But Senator, France continues to take in refugees. When we stop, doesn't that say a lot about our values, that fear has worked so much that we'll let fear of one or two coming in stop us from supporting all these poor people?
Yeah, and you know, most of them are people who would love to stay in Syria, but they can't because they're being raped and murdered. So I understand exactly what you're saying. All I'm suggesting is that the enemy has been able to infiltrate refugee flow into Europe. I think it would be wise to make sure we have a system that takes people who are oppressed and not part of ISIL. But if you stop refugees completely, there are 20 other ways to get into the United States. Most of the attackers were citizens of the country where they reside. So the key to making us safe is to destroy ISIL over there. The key to the refugee problem is a safe haven within Syria so they don't have to leave. I'm calling for a timeout. I'm not turning my back on the problem.
Timeout for how long?
Until we can get a system that I think is well vetted. But the key, again, is to stop the reason they leave. We would be smart to create a no-fly zone in Syria, a safe haven, so the poor Syrian people you're discussing never have to leave to begin with and can go back into their countries. I think that is a smarter solution than what we're proposing today.
President, I know you disagree with most of President Obama's foreign policy positions. Do you see him as wrong-headed, well-intentioned? How do you view his presidency vis-a-vis foreign relations?
You know, I think Bush made his fair share of mistakes, and so did Lindsey Graham. I underestimated what would happen if you brought the Iraqi army down too quick. That vacuum was filled by Sunni extremists, al-Qaeda types in Iraq. The surge did work. All I would ask this president to do is reevaluate, not be so stubborn that you can't change. And I would just suggest to the president that you'll never destroy ISIL from the air. There's an opportunity to go in on the ground where 90% of the army comes from the region, 10% from Western powers. Take the opportunity to destroy ISIL on your watch. Nothing would please me more than President Obama destroys ISIL before the next president has to deal with this. And if he doesn't correct his policies and change like Bush did, we're going to get hit here.
Have you met with President Obama?
No, I made an offer Friday after the attack to sit down with him. You know, there are people in my party that I think don't get it, quite frankly. There are people in my party who've opposed using force after Assad crossed the red line drawn by President Obama. You know, that if you use chemical weapons, I'm going to act. Well, there are people in my party objected to using force. There are people in my party that opposed a no-fly zone 3 years ago, trained the Free Syrian Army 3 years ago when it mattered. So this is not exclusively a President Obama problem. But what have I learned from all my visits? That ISIL can't be contained, it can't be compromised with, it has to be destroyed, and most people in the region are where I'm at. They just need our help.
Do you declare a formal war?
You do with ISIL what we did with al-Qaeda. An authorization to use military force, not limited by geography, time, or means. After the attack of 9/11, the American family came together. We gave an authorization to President Bush to do whatever was necessary, wherever necessary, using whatever means necessary to protect our country from al-Qaeda. I would do the same thing here. I would give an authorization to use military force to go after ISIL in cyberspace, on the internet. Wherever they reside, we will go. Whatever means necessary, we will use until they're destroyed because they're a threat to our homeland. That's what I suggest we do. Be at war with them, they're at war with us.
But he went into Iraq, which did not participate in 9/11.
Yeah, I think, number one, going into Afghanistan after 9/11 made perfect sense. We can debate whether or not we should have taken Saddam down. I'm glad he's gone, but knowing what I know now, would I have supported a 100,000 troop invasion? Probably not, because at the end of the day, that did create a problem. But the surge did work too, Larry. In 2010, Iraq was in a good spot. Security was being improved. Political progress was being made. Leaving Iraq without any residual forces has led to the rise of al-Qaeda in Iraq becoming ISIL. But there's two things going on in the Mideast that I want your viewers to understand, at least from my point of view. Young people are not going to live in dictatorships for our convenience anymore. The Arab Spring is real. Started in Tunisia, went to Egypt, Libya, and eventually Syria. So I'm going to side with young people who demand social justice and a stronger voice for their lives. And there's a fight for the heart and soul of Islam between radicals like ISIL and most of the faith. I'm going to side with people in the faith who would reject their ideology and live in peace with us. And that means a long-term commitment, not of 100,000 troops, but of America being involved in multiple ways over a long period of time. If we'd left Germany and Japan after World War II, only God knows what would have happened.
Ted Cruz and Jeb Bush have suggested only accepting Christian refugees.
No.
What do you make of that?
I think a Muslim woman who's been raped deserves our attention and care as much as anybody else. I understand sort of what they're saying, that there's no place for a Christian to go in the Mideast, but it comes across wrong. Here's what we should do: be good Americans. Our values and our national security go together. The character of our nation and our national security are tied together. A timeout makes sense after Paris, but the idea that we will only take people of a certain faith is not the right approach. The right approach is to destroy ISIL, who is an enemy of mankind, embrace those in the faith who would live in peace with us, try to build up society so that they have a hopeful life versus a glorious death being offered by the terrorist. That's what we need to do.
Are you shocked by the polls of Trump and Carson?
Yes and no. I'm not shocked by the fact that people are frustrated with Washington, but here's the question. Is Lindsey Graham the problem or the solution? My big sin among some in my party is I work with Democrats to fix a broken immigration system. I try to be bipartisan when it makes sense. There are people in Washington on the left and the right that can only say no. That's what's wrong with Washington. We need people who can get to yes. Ronald Reagan and Tip O'Neill, one conservative, one liberal, came together to save Social Security from bankruptcy in 1983. We need to do the same thing again. So I'm running as a Republican, proud of it, but embracing bipartisanship. If I get to be the president of the country, it will be of all the country, not just the Republican Party. So Trump and Cruz, I think, after Paris, are going to be more challenged because Donald Trump has high energy and not many very good ideas in my view. Dr. Carson's a fine man, but I quite frankly don't understand his foreign policy. So after Paris, I hope people will look at the job of being commander-in-chief in a different way.
One more thing, Senator. Are you in it for the long haul?
Yeah, I am, Larry. I really believe after 35 trips to Iraq and Afghanistan, after 30 years in the Air Force, 140 days on the ground as an Air Force reservist in Iraq and Afghanistan, that I'm best prepared to be commander-in-chief. And I hope the voters will be able to decide my future, not a pollster. I really believe, and Larry, we've known each other for 20 years, that I'd be a good president. I do work well with Democrats. I try to find ways to solve problems like Medicare and Social Security going broke, finding a way to deal with our domestic needs back here at home. But I have a determination about destroying radical Islam that I think is unique to me that we need at this time. I'm in it for the long haul. I'm in it to win it. And time will tell as to whether or not I make it.
Good seeing you, Lindsey. Thanks so much.
Thanks, pal. We'll see you.
Senator Lindsey Graham.